All right, welcome again, everybody. This is Mr. Zawacki, and today, this evening, we're going to be talking about some tough concepts in biology. These are just a look into some of the challenging concepts that are going to be on the biology EOC exam. Obviously, I can't cover every single topic you've learned about all year, but I can try my best to get as many as we can in tonight and tomorrow night. Again, I'm Mr. Zawacki. I'm with Hillsborough Virtual School. I've been teaching biology since 2012 and have a good understanding of what to expect on this test. So that's kind of why we're all here, and that's why we're going to get started. First of all, just one small note that you guys might want to mark down. The time tomorrow has changed just due to schedule conflict. It still will be tomorrow evening, just about an hour or just about 90 minutes later. It'll go from 8:30 to 9:15, so I will have this up with a timer just in case you forget. It was from 7 to 8 like now, but it is tomorrow still from 8:30 p.m. until 9:15 p.m. So just make sure you mark that down so we're not here, too early tomorrow night. All right. First of all, I'm going to be jumping all around on different concepts, just like you'll see them on the exam. So there's no rhyme or reason to the order. These are just specific topics that I thought were challenging to learn about. First of all that you see here is the carbon cycle. This shows the element carbon cycling all around Earth. And it doesn't matter where you start because it's a cycle. It'll catch back up to itself eventually. We'll start up here. There's carbon dioxide in our air right now. We breathe it out as a waste product. Well, plants take in carbon dioxide, and they turn that to oxygen. That's called photosynthesis. So carbon, first of all, is in the air as carbon dioxide. Then the carbon dioxide gets turned into glucose, which is a type of carbohydrate that plants use to make energy too. After a plant has done that, has obtained glucose, well, we know animals eat plants. Many, many herbivores eat plants, like this sheep. So first step, it's carbon dioxide in the air. Second step, carbon dioxide turns into glucose, such as sugar. Animals eat plants, so they break down the glucose and they breathe it out as a waste product, which is animal respiration, or also cellular respiration. So that's one cycle right there, between 1, 2, and 3. But there's even a bigger cycle that we play a role in. It's good to a point, but it's more bad than good. Secondly, another version of that cycle, when animals die, the carbon goes into the ground, and the carbon over millions of years will turn into fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. If they stay in the earth, that's fine. But what we do is we dig those up. We dig those coal and oil and natural gas up, and we turn it into auto and factory emissions. That's what we burn to get electricity. That's what the Tico power plant that we're close to in Hillsborough County uses a lot of the time, burning different fossil fuels to create the electricity that we use. The product that gets burnt off, the smoke right here, turns into carbon dioxide, and then the whole cycle repeats itself. So that's the carbon cycle. The one caveat to think about, though, is that we are beginning to burn too much carbon dioxide. Billions of humans on the earth burning lots of fossil fuels, releasing a lot of carbon dioxide in the air. So this is causing, the carbon dioxide gas is causing Earth to actually heat up quicker and faster than what it naturally should. And that's called global warming. If anybody's ever heard of that before, it's directly because of burning too many fossil fuels. The good news is the majority of scientists recognize this, and we're making small steps. More solar power, more wind power, to kind of negate this extra carbon that we're burning. The carbon cycle is a very normal cycle on Earth, but if we add to it, it could be detrimental as well. So that's the carbon cycle. All right, another thing, energy pyramid. We have, this just shows the order of really animals on Earth on how they consume and eat other animals. We have plants on the bottom. Then we have our herbivores like grasshoppers and mice, this next step up. We have secondary consumers like the frog and the cat. And then we even have tertiary consumers sometimes like a snake or a fox. Now, what this pyramid shows is not only what eats what, like consumers will eat producers, and the secondary consumers will eat the primary consumers, and the tertiary consumers will eat the secondary consumers. We know that's all true. However, we also should keep into account the biomass on Earth. If we start with plants, and we look at 100% of the energy that the plants make, so this is just energy. Okay? The plants make 100% of the energy. They take in the sun, carbon dioxide, water, and they make energy. When a grasshopper or mouse eats it, they only get 10%. So that's it. Only 10% of the energy transfers to the next level. And only 10% of that, or 1%, goes up to the next level. Remember, 90% loss, 10% transfer. And then the top tertiary consumer only gets 0.1%, or 10% of 1%. So if we have, let's just go with numbers. Let's say there's 1,000 units of energy here. Well, this would turn into 100. This would turn into 10. And this would turn into just 1. Reason why is just because energy is inefficient. We don't break down energy as well as what we could. So that's why when you look outside, you see tons of producers, grass and trees and shrubs everywhere. You see some grasshoppers and mice. You see less frogs or, feral cats. But then you see very few of top consumers like fox or snakes, because there's just not that much energy to get to the top. So that explains the energy pyramid. It also explains producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. All right, switching gears. Then you guys, at some point of your biology year, you learned about the 4 macromolecules. This is really the only chemistry part that you learned about in biology. And they go together because it's biochemistry. These are particles, these are molecules of life. There are 4 of them. Carbohydrates are first. These are number 1. And what you should know about each of these are what they're made up of, what they do, and have some examples. So carbohydrates, what they're made up of: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Their building block, or the piece that builds them, are monosaccharides. And there are 3 main types of carbs. They're monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. And it's very easy. They're just named by the number of carbons. Examples of foods that contain carbs: breads, grains, potatoes, rice, pastas, stuff like that. It does give you energy for cellular respiration, though. And it is good for you to a point, but in very small amounts, actually. Monosaccharides, remember, the building blocks for carbohydrates. Monosaccharides contain 1 sugar. See? 1 ring. Disaccharides contain 2 sugars. 1, 2. Polysaccharides contain more than 2. This one happens to have 4. Okay? So far, I'm going to open up for the check mark, yes or no. How are we so far with carbohydrates, with the energy pyramid, and with the carbon cycle? Check mark means I've learned more, or I get it. At least I got it. X's mean I don't get this at all yet. Okay, it looks like the majority of us, or pretty much all of us, who are using the check marks of the X's agree that we got it. So carbon cycle, energy pyramid, carbohydrates, good. Okay, so carbohydrates are the first one of the 4 macromolecules. The second one, in no particular order, are lipids. Lipids are another name for fats, but don't let that word fool you because you need fats all the time in your diet. Why? Because it stores energy for a long time. If you don't eat for 2 weeks, you can still live. Why? Because lipids. They also make up every single one of your cell membranes out of all the trillions of the cells that you have. It contains the same 3 elements as carbs as well. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The building block, though, is called fatty acids or triglycerides. Those are the pieces that build lipids. And you're going to find lipids in things like oil, butter, fat, but some good things too, like omega-3s. So keep that in mind about lipids. Their nickname is fats, but they do long-term energy storage, insulation. They're made up of all of our cell membranes, and there are a couple different types too. These are triglycerides. These are cholesterol. Believe it or not, you have natural cholesterol in your body. There's phospholipids. This is what makes up the cell membrane, and other things as well, such as protein. So lipids, again, guys, know that they're fats, and know what they're made up of, which are fatty acids or triglycerides, and know what they do. Proteins is another one. Proteins, that's our third macromolecule. They also do energy and build muscle. They contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Nitrogen is the additional element. The building block for them are amino acids. So amino acids build proteins. And the foods that are found in them are meat, eggs, and dairy. Now, I know that visual to the right is a little bit blurry, but I'll do my best to explain it. Okay, so the first time when proteins join together, when their amino acids link up, they join, which looks like a chain or an amino acid chain. That's just a straight line. Secondary, that's called a primary structure. Secondary structure is when it becomes more advanced, more together, more complete. And that turns into a pleated sheet or a helix. Either way, that's a secondary structure. Tertiary structure is just one single globular structure, whereas a quaternary structure are several globulars put together. So really what you need to know with proteins, they build energy and they build muscle. They're made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and now nitrogen. Their building block is amino acids. They're found in meat, eggs, and dairy products. And there's 4 different types of proteins: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Each one gets more and more complex as it gets bigger. And the last one, nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are pretty much just your DNA and your RNA. And those are your hereditary information, or information as well to build proteins. So DNA is your genetic information itself. RNA is the information that we still have inside of our cells, but we use that to build protein. The letters or the elements that go with that are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Remember how carbs and lipids are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Proteins add nitrogen. Nucleic acids have nitrogen and phosphorus. So make sure we know that as well. Also know that the two examples, and the only two examples that we need to know about, are RNA and DNA. RNA looks like half of what DNA is. RNA is a single helix used to build protein. DNA is way different. That's a double helix. That's our genetic information that makes us what we are. And the building block for nucleic acids are called nucleotides. So again, make sure you know it's your hereditary information. Also, make sure that you know that it's made up of nucleotides. Also, know about the 5 elements that make it up: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And finally, the two examples, RNA versus DNA. All right, switching gears. When things go in and out of cells, there's a couple different ways that we learn about that we need to know. That's all cell transport is. Particles or water or whatever going in and out of cells. Here are the types of cell transport. Diffusion is like particles, like cologne. When you spray cologne, it goes from a very high concentration inside that bottle to a very low concentration outside of the bottle. That's what diffusion is, where particles go from high to low concentration. Facilitated diffusion is where it goes to high to low concentration with help. We'll talk about that in a second, but the only thing that helps it are proteins. Osmosis is another form of cell transport. That's where it goes from high to low concentration with the water moving towards the equilibrium. So osmosis is the same exact thing as diffusion. However, osmosis is water moving from high to low concentration. And then you have passive and active transport. Passive transport just means no energy needed, high to low. Active transport means energy needed. You're going backwards, low to high concentration. So diffusion is passive transport. Facilitated diffusion is still passive transport. Osmosis is also passive transport. The only thing that's active transport is active transport itself, where it goes opposite. Also, when you see cells in different solutions, there's a couple different solutions that cells can sit in: hypertonic, hypotonic, or isotonic. When a cell is sitting in water and everything is equal, that's isotonic. Equal, isotonic. If the cell is swelling, I want you to think of this. This is how I like to show my students to remember it. I want you to look at the letter E in hyper and the letter O in hypo. If the cell is swelling, we obviously know water is going into it, and it looks like the letter O in hypotonic. If the cell is shrinking, that means water is moving out of it. And it shrinks, that's hypertonic. So hypo is when it swells, hypertonic is when it shrinks. I want you to look at that for one moment, and then we will get continuing in about 60 seconds. Okay, so now that we know about the types of cell transport, next is seeing it in visual. So here's the cell transport images that we were just talking about. Diffusion is where the particles go from a high concentration to a low concentration across the cell membrane. Facilitated diffusion is the same thing, but with the help of a protein. The protein helps it move across. Active transport, remember how it's the opposite? It goes from a low concentration to a high concentration. And in order to do that, you need help. And that help is our energy unit, called ATP. ATP helps us do everything in terms of energy. So there's your cell transport images. Diffusion, particles go from high to low concentration. Facilitated diffusion, same thing, with the help of a protein. And then active transport is where it goes low to high concentration with help of ATP. Okay, so switching gears now, just to do another check here. So I want to use the check mark or the X if you are okay or not okay with cell transport. And then the biochemistry with nucleic acids, proteins, lipids, and carbs. Okay, so obviously the overwhelming majority is saying we're good to go, so we will continue. All right, so then you guys learned about, in some point this year, the cell cycle. And the cell cycle is really easy. It's just a repetitive cycle, just like the carbon cycle, but this is the cell cycle. This is a repetitive cycle that all of our trillions of cells go through on a regular basis. As you can see, most of the cell cycle, roughly 80 to 90% of the cell cycle, cells are in one phase, and that's called interphase. Interphase is made up of G1, where the cell grows, S, where it synthesizes and makes copies of things, and G2, where it grows more and prepares to split. So during this huge phase called interphase, our cells are pretty much doubling in size and doubling the amount of stuff they have inside of them. Why would they double in size? Why would they double the amount of stuff? Well, because cells want to grow by creating more cells. And that's where you get the whole cell cycle. So first part is interphase, where it grows and doubles everything. Then very quickly, it'll go through mitosis, where the chromosomes and nucleus kind of get pulled apart. And then cytokinesis, where the cells get pulled apart. And that's it. Once you have two cells, 1 and 2, they'll both go back into interphase by themselves and do the same thing over again. That's what the whole cell cycle is about. Reason why cells do the cell cycle? To grow or repair, maybe broken or damaged tissue. So we said mitosis, but there's also this other word called meiosis. So we learned about mitosis and meiosis throughout the year too. This isn't difficult. This is mitosis on top. So this is all mitosis. And then meiosis on the bottom. So looking at it, we know meiosis has more steps, double the amount of steps, actually. And mitosis looks, not as complicated, which is true. Mitosis is done by cells just to grow and repair and to make doubles. That's really it. Meiosis actually is done by only reproductive cells. So where 99% of our body cells do mitosis, the only cells in the human body that do meiosis are either sperm or egg cells in humans. So mitosis is much more common. And it's very simple. When the chromosomes duplicate and they're appearing, that's prophase. When they line up in the middle, metaphase. When they separate, anaphase. And then when they divide and reproduce, when they divide out and separate, that's telophase / cytokinesis. Meiosis is pretty similar. There is a prophase, they call it prophase 1. There is a metaphase 1. If you see the difference though, look, they're all lined up in the equator of the cell here. Here they're still lined up, but they're in pairs. And that's where you get your division of chromosomes. Then you have anaphase 1, and then you have telophase / cytokinesis 1. And then it'll go through the whole process again. Prophase 2, which it doesn't show, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, and then finally telophase 2 / cytokinesis. So mitosis just goes through prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase one time. It splits the cells, but they still have the full amount of chromosomes. Remember how mitosis doubles up in size? Well, it just splits again, so they have the regular number. So when you start with 46 chromosomes here, it ends with 46 chromosomes. They're just the halves of the double version. So that's why there's still 46. Here with meiosis, though, you would start with 46 chromosomes. They doubled up. But this reason right here is why it goes from 46 to 23. Why do meiosis cells only have 23? Because reproductive cells only should have half the number of chromosomes. That's how we were made. 23 chromosomes from our father, 23 chromosomes from our mother, creating one cell, 46 chromosomes that we began our life. So meiosis makes cells that are half the number of chromosomes to be able to reproduce with. Here are your differences too. Mitosis, done by all regular body cells. Meiosis, sex cells only, sperm or egg cells. Mitosis goes from one cell to two identical cells. Meiosis goes from 1 to 4 cells, and they're all different. Mitosis has the full amount of chromosomes, called diploid. Meiosis has half the number of chromosomes, called haploid. 46, 23. Okay? All right. And then we got into these things, which I'm going to skim the surface of today, but this is photosynthesis and then cellular respiration. Always want to talk about them together at the same time. I'll explain why. First of all, photosynthesis. What are you going to need to know for the EOC? Well, you got to know it's done by plants. You got to know that. Plants only, too. You also should know what goes on, right? Carbon dioxide, water, energy from the sun all go together and into the plant to create glucose and oxygen. What was that again? Carbon dioxide, water, and energy will create glucose and oxygen. That's all those letters mean up top. That's just the chemical formula for it. We should also know where it's done in plant cells. You know it's only done by plant cells, but where? And that's done in the chloroplast. So again, this just shows you visually on the bottom. It's the same exact thing. Photosynthesis is done by only plants. 3 things that go in are energy, water, carbon dioxide. It goes into the plant, and it will create oxygen and sugar called glucose. And that's what plants do on a regular basis. Is there more to photosynthesis than that? Yeah, there's 2 steps of photosynthesis. It's called the light-dependent and light-independent cycles. Should you know those steps as well? Yes, but we need to talk about the main surface part of photosynthesis before you get in depth about it. So again, photosynthesis is done by plants only. It's done in the chloroplast of plants too. And the 3 things that are needed, carbon dioxide, water, and energy. The 2 things that come out, the products that plants make, oxygen that we breathe, and glucose that we use to eat. Cellular respiration is paired with photosynthesis because they are opposites to one another. Remember here, look, carbon dioxide, water, and energy go in, glucose and oxygen go out. Here, glucose, oxygen go in. Carbon dioxide, water, and energy in the form of ATP are the three products that are made. Here we go again. Glucose, oxygen go in. Carbon dioxide, water, and energy in the form of 38 ATP units are made as products. It's not done in the chloroplast because our cells don't have that, but these are done in either the cytoplasm or the mitochondria in animal cells. And believe it or not, cellular respiration is not just animals. Plants and animals can do cellular respiration. Is that all we need to know about cellular respiration? No, there's 3 steps to it. There's glycolysis, which happens in the cytoplasm. There's the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, which both happen in the mitochondria. So you should also look over those 3 steps and briefly know what happens, what goes in, what goes out of each step. So again, guys, photosynthesis done by only plants in the chloroplast. And carbon dioxide, water, and energy go in, glucose and oxygen come out. There are 2 steps of photosynthesis, light-dependent and light-independent reactions, so make sure you know specifically what happens there. Cellular respiration is only the same thing but backwards. This is done by both plants and animals in either the cytoplasm or mitochondria of the cell. Glucose and oxygen go in. Carbon dioxide, water, and energy are the 3 things that go out. So they're opposite of photosynthesis. And there are 3 stages to cellular respiration: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. So make sure you know what happens with that as well. All right, and last what we're going to talk about today is just the basics of genetics. You're absolutely going to have a Punnett square problem or, questions that deal with these words that are on this paper, for sure. And that's what we're going to kind of finish up with today. So first of all, Mendelian genetics, all that means is the guy by the name of Gregor Mendel came up with this stuff. And he did that by studying pea plants in the 1800s. And a couple things that he came up with, first of all, are genotypes and phenotypes. Genotypes are simply the 2 alleles, or the letters that we like to call them, that assign for a trait. And the phenotype is the physical appearance. So if I'm saying words like tall, short, brown hair, blue eyes, blonde hair, whatever, those are all phenotypes. That's the physical appearance. Whereas genotypes are the letters. So when we say genotypes, that's like big R, or big R, little r, or little r. Those are the genotypes. Genotypes code for phenotypes. Big R, and little r, they're the same letters, right? Same. Well, that's called homozygous. The prefix HOMO means same. So big R, and little r are homozygous alleles. Big R is homozygous dominant. Little r is homozygous recessive. Hetero means different. Hetero, different. So homozygous, same. Hetero means different. So the only one, if they ever say heterozygous or hybrid, that is always big letter, small letter. And then we'll go back to this in a second, but I don't want to get you confused on questions. So don't worry about the bottom part yet. But we should know genotypes are the letters, phenotypes is the appearance. Homozygous means 2 of the same letters. Heterozygous means 2 different letters. On the test, you may see pure. That's the same thing as homozygous. Heterozygous, the same thing as hybrid. So pure or hybrid. Okay. So cross sample. We'll say rough is dominant. A homozygous rough-skinned fruit is cross-pollinated. So I need to think. It doesn't matter what letter I choose, I've got to keep it the same letter. A homozygous rough-skinned. Well, I know HOMO means the same, and rough is dominant. So I'm going to open up the chat box. Which two letters, I'm using the letter R, which two letters would I assign for homozygous rough? And you can type that right in the chat box. Which two letters would you put for homozygous rough? Yep, good job for everybody typing the same thing. Big R, big R. That's homozygous rough. It's cross-pollinated with a heterozygous fruit. Which two letters would be heterozygous, do you guys think? Good. Big R, little r. That's heterozygous fruit. So the question is, what are the chances that the second generation will be smooth skin? So all you have to do is put one up here, one of the parents, doesn't matter which one, and then you put the other parent on the other side, doesn't matter which one. And then all you have to do is cross them. Big R, big R, big R, big R, big R, little r, and another big R, and a little r. So the question is, what are the chances the second generation, which are these four in here, will be smooth skinned? Who wants to guess? What are the chances that the second generation will be smooth skinned? What percent? 0, 25, 50, 75, 100%? Well, in order to be smooth skin, you have to have little r, little r. I don't see any. So that's 0%. Good job. For those of you who wrote that. Good job. Other times they may ask you for the genotype or the phenotype ratio as well. That's very easy. For phenotype ratio, you just count. How many dominant? I got 4 dominants. And I got 0 recessives, little r, little r. For genotype ratio, well, I got to count. How many big R's do I have? 2. How many big R, little r's do I have? Also 2. How many little r's do I have? 0. So the phenotype ratio would be 4 dominant to 0 recessive. The genotype ratio would be 2 to 2 to 0. 2 big R, 2 big R, 0, little r, little r. Okay, so pedigrees. So again, remember how I skipped over this part? Because this is the same thing right here. Okay, so pedigrees are one other genetic chart to look at. It's not hard. If it's square, it's a male. If it's a circle, it's a female. If it's not shaded, no trait. They don't have the trait, whatever trait they're looking at. If it's halfway shaded, they're a carrier, so they're a heterozygous. They would have the trait if it was a dominant trait, but they may not if it's a recessive trait. So halfway shaded means they're a carrier, they're heterozygous. If it's fully shaded, they got the trait, 100%. So the question is, and this is the last question for today, which two individuals have the trait and got it from their father? How you answer that is by writing the Roman numeral first, which is I, or which is 1, and then 2 I's is 2, 3 I's is 3, and IV is 4. So you'd write the Roman numeral first, and then you put dash whatever number is assigned to that row. So 1-1 would be this guy. 1-2 would be this guy. So let's go to the question again. Which two individuals have the trait and got it from their father? So good luck. Try your best to write the two correct individuals that have the trait and got it from their father. Great job, Allie and Anthony and Savannah. Yes, you guys are getting the correct answers. Tyler, Jeff, Natalia, Joshua, Javier, Tyler. Yeah, very good. Paris, I know you. All right, good job, guys. Yeah, it's very simple. Look, this person right here, they have the trait and they got it from their dad. This person here, they have the trait and they got it from their dad. So it'd be 3-1, comma, 4-3. So that's the two individuals that have the trait and got it from their father. All right. So last thing for the day, guys, or last two things for the day. First of all, check mark yes or X no if you guys understand the last couple things with genetics and photosynthesis and cellular respiration. And also, feel free now to ask any questions that you have about what we learned about today. If you have questions, you can type them on the bottom. If you don't, you're free to go. But remember, tomorrow night is not 7 o'clock. It is 8:30. We have a little late night session, 8:30 to 9:15 for the second half of what we've been doing. So I hope this helped out. I hope you guys, got something from this that'll help you out with at least a couple questions on the exam. So thank you guys for coming, and you guys are free to go. If you have questions, please ask them. You may need to ask them more than once if a lot of people are typing, but we'll go from there.